Peter Friedrich, my address is confidential. In 2014, as India was holding national elections, Narendra Modi threw his hat into the ring to try to become the nation's next prime minister. Here in the Chicago region,
And sir, I'm going to interrupt you. How does this address public business?
this relates to the interests of the city of the village.
From a foreign election?
Yes, sir, I'll get to it.
All right, if you could hurry up, I'll give you a little leeway.
Here in the Chicago region, one old friend of Modi's was so ecstatic that he apparently put everything else on hold so he could devote his time and resources to make sure that the Indian prime ministerial candidate got elected. Bharat Barai had already spent the better part of a decade popularizing Modi among certain segments of the Indian American population. Now he mobilized hundreds of volunteers and personally led them to travel to India from America to campaign for Modi. It was an odd choice.
Trustee
First,
Pojek, as the chair of the meeting, I'll give you discretion whether to continue or not, but this is not a public issue regarding the village of Glendale Heights.
my understanding is that legally I'm allowed to speak on issues off agenda.
You're allowed to speak on issues relative to the village of the business of the village of Glendale Heights.
This relates to the interests of the people of Glendale Heights.
What is your address, sir?
Pardon?
What is your address? You didn't give it to me.
He doesn't, Chester, he doesn't need to give you his address. He doesn't.
I want to know if he lives in a village.
My address is confidential. I'm a freelance journalist, and due to the nature of my work, I do not share my address publicly.
But you're not required to give it, sir.
Thank you.
You're not required.
Okay, thank you.
But again, unless your comments address the business of the village of Glendale Heights, your comments are not appropriate at this time.
My comments relate to the interests of the citizens of the village.
I'll give it to the chair. I'm just giving my legal opinion.
I agree with the attorney, and I think we should have a roll call with the board members.
Well, you don't need a roll call.
No? Okay.
If it's not a proper public comment, the board does not have to, the committee does not have to address it.
Well, I have to say, many times I've spoken at villages, town councils, city councils, county boards of supervisors, this is the first time I've ever been shut down.
I would say let him speak because,
I'm just advising you. You could let him continue.
No, that's fine. But I mean, since it's a public, so there is no harm to listening. And as he said, that it's going to be for the people. And we do live here, so I wouldn't mind listening for 5 minutes. That's my personal opinion, yeah.
Well, I object to that, Mr. Siddiqui.
Yeah. But unfortunately, I'm not in the chair, so whatever the chairman has to say.
Anybody want to listen to him?
I'll listen to him.
Yeah.
Trustee Light?
I'll hear him out.
Pat?
Go ahead, let him
Oh, go ahead.
do what he's got to do, I guess.
What about me? You never asked me. What am I, chopped liver?
You're always answered.
Poke me down.
Can I have my 5 minutes then?
Yes.
Okay, I'll be articulate, I hope. In 2014, as India was holding national elections, Narendra Modi threw his hat into the ring to try to become the nation's next prime minister. Here in the Chicago region, one old friend of Modi's was so ecstatic that he apparently put everything else on hold so he could devote his time and resources to make sure that the Indian prime ministerial candidate got elected. Bharat Barai had already spent the better part of a decade popularizing Modi among certain segments of the Indian American population. Now he mobilized hundreds of volunteers and personally led them to travel from America to India to campaign for Modi. It was an odd choice. First, Modi was a lifelong member of the RSS, a fascist paramilitary dedicated to exterminating Indian Christians and Muslims. But then Bharat Barai is a longtime leader in the U.S. wing of the VHP, a militant outfit that serves as the RSS's religious wing. Second, Modi was actually banned at the time from entering the U.S. after being implicated while serving as head of the state of Gujarat in overseeing or even orchestrating an anti-Muslim pogrom there. Third, Bharat Barai is a U.S. citizen. One might find it strange for an American citizen to participate in campaigning for the election of India's prime minister, but that didn't stop Barai or Barai's efforts, or some might call them interferences in India's sacred and sovereign elections. And those efforts paid off. Modi was elected. His job done, Bharat Barai must have had time on his hands. So, less than 2 years after working to get Modi elected in India, Barai turned his attention to getting Raja Krishnamoorthi elected to U.S. Congress in Illinois. During the 2016 primary election, Barai threw his voice and his cash behind Krishnamoorthi's campaign. By the day of that first primary election, Barai and his wife had already given the prospective congressman's campaign nearly $11,000. We all know how it ended for Raja Krishnamoorthi. He won the March 2016 primary, then the November 2016 general, and was then sworn into office in January 2017. Remember Bharat Barai's support for Modi? Well, after his hefty donations to Raja Krishnamoorthi's successful campaign, Barai must have been thrilled to see the newly minted congressman, within his first 6 months in office, travel to India to personally meet Modi. Modi's RSS past, his implication in a massive anti-Muslim pogrom, and his decade-long ban from our own country didn't seem to bother Krishnamurti. Posing for pictures with the pogrom-tainted prime minister, Krishnamurti grinned like a schoolboy meeting Santa Claus. And then, immediately upon returning to Chicago, Congressman Raja Krishnamoorthi welcomed at his office a delegation of HSS members, HSS being the international wing of the RSS. Yet another of Raja Krishnamoorthi's major donors, HSS USA Vice President Ramesh Patada of Texas, must have appreciated that. Patada incidentally exemplifies how Bharat Barai is not the only major donor to Raja Krishnamoorthi, who devoted immense time and resources to getting Modi elected in India. This is just the tip of the iceberg. There is so much more. We haven't touched yet, for instance, on how Krishnamurti shared the stage in Chicago with the chief of the RSS. Nor have we discussed what the RSS is doing at this very moment, laying the groundwork and setting the stage for the genocide of Indian Muslims. Yet, oddly enough, the liberal Raja Krishnamoorthi, for all of his supposed concern about human rights, appears entirely disinterested in speaking out against the genocidal fascism that is taking root in India right now. Is it possible that's because the impending genocide in India will be perpetrated by a fascist regime that was put in place in part...
Mr. Peter, your time is up. Your 5 minutes is up.
May I finish my sentence?
No, you had 5 minutes. Thank you. And anybody else in the audience want to say anything?
Thank you.
Please come up. Thank you. Please state your name.
Oh, thank you.